I'm Matt Hurt at Obsessive Viewer.
I'm Tiny at Obsessive Tiny.
And this is Mike. You can find me at I am Mike White on Twitter.
And this is ObsessiveViewer.com's The Obsessive Viewer Podcast. Star tissue, music, all that.
That was good. You put a little like the Obsessive Viewer Podcast.
I need my
a little
sultry
attitude in it.
Oh yeah,
We're elves with attitude.
Oh, nice reference.
Oh
Thanks.
wow.
I hated that kid.
Yeah, he was a bit. He overacted a part that was like 3 lines.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
A kid overacting? Whew.
Yeah.
Wow. So welcome guys. How you guys doing?
I am awesome.
We're good. Yeah.
Yes. I kind of want to start the episode just talking about Phillip Seymour Hoffman just a little bit, but before that, I want to make an announcement because last week our episode was really messed up, so I'm not sure how many people listened to it. But if you are listening to this podcast right now and you have a podcast or know someone who has a podcast or whatever, we're doing an Oscar pool that is going to be cross podcasts. So if someone has a podcast, they're eligible to submit one ballot and a clip of them talking about the nominees of a certain category that we'll give them, so that we can put it into our Oscar episode at the end of the month. So if you have someone that you think would be interested, or you are interested, just send us an email at ovpodcast@gmail.com and we'll get you all set up.
Cool.
All right.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and we've got a lot. It's gonna be awesome. We've got a lot of good podcasts that are gonna be submitting, and
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it.
People are already into it and stuff.
Oh yeah.
That's cool.
Oh yeah.
I'm excited.
Me too.
Yeah.
So should we go ahead and just kick off the episode with Phillip Seymour Hoffman?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Because
so.
we're recording this Monday night. So yesterday afternoon on Sunday, it was announced, or it was news broke that Phillip Seymour Hoffman was found dead in. There were reports of an apartment, but I think I saw something about a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
But he had died of a heroin overdose. And how'd you guys respond? What was you? Let's talk about it, guys.
I was really
pretty
surprised.
bummed. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. I was just really surprised, to hear that he had. I mean, I was surprised to hear he died, but I was more surprised by the circumstances. If I had to make a list of celebrities that I thought would die of an overdose, Phillip Seymour Hoffman would be incredibly low on the list.
Right.
So obviously he hit it, at least from the public, really well. It's really sad. The guy we all tend to focus on the art, like, oh, he's a great actor. We really liked everything he did. But, the guy was married and had 3 young kids.
Yeah, younger than 10 years old.
Right. I mean, you gotta, keep that in perspective. So
Right.
It's really sad.
Yep.
Yeah, I was bummed too. It's pretty nonsensical and almost unfair to compare, but Paul Walker, just recently died, and we did a podcast dedicated to him. But this one kind of hit me harder because Paul Walker's career was not one I followed all that much.
Right.
And I'd be willing to say Phillip Seymour Hoffman is in my top 10 favorite actors ever. So that was
Nice.
it was kind of a blow. I was shocked.
Yeah, I had an interesting reaction. I don't want to seem crass at all because I understand addiction is a horrible, horrible thing. But I mean, the guy had kids, and it's just I'd heard that he was 23 years sober, and then he had gotten I think there were reports that he tried to go into rehab last year.
Mm-hmm.
So he was seeking help and everything, but you brought up Paul Walker's death, Mike, and that just makes me think it's an interesting separation of those two events, because I also didn't really follow Paul Walker's career. I wasn't really. I just wasn't into his career, but the circumstances of his death were extraordinarily tragic.
Mm-hmm.
But then here, I follow Phillip Seymour Hoffman's career, and I like many of his performances are just really outstanding. But I can't help but think that what a wasteful death, or what a waste it was, because he didn't have to do that. Like,
Yeah.
Coming from someone who, like I myself, I don't use drugs or anything. I've never done drugs or anything, but because of that, I can tell you with 100% certainty that there is zero chance that I will die of a heroin overdose.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't know. It rubbed me the wrong way, and it's tragic, and
it's tough. It definitely casts a negative light on him.
It does, especially having kids.
I totally see what you're saying about how it's difficult. It's difficult because it was one that could have been avoided. But you also don't know. We don't know the circumstances which led to his relapse and what got him there in the first place. It's unfortunate because that was kind of my first reaction too. Was well, man, what an idiot! Why did he do that?
Yeah.
But you also don't know the life story that led him there. Exactly.
But and maybe this is speaking to a much bigger conversation, but there's also, I don't know the circumstances that led to his relapse, and I also don't understand, I don't know the circumstances that led to his first doing drugs, but I mean, I've never tried it. Cause I've known, yes, heroin, I'm not going to go and just use heroin one day because it sounds like a fun time. It's just, I know there's no misconceptions about heroin use.
Yeah.
It's pretty much all negative, and I don't know. And it's probably insensitive of me to say that, but it just seems like a waste that someone so talented would and still young, he was 46 years old, would just throw it away like that. Yeah. So that's where I am, but like I said, he was a phenomenal actor. Even some of his kind of, I know Twister's been thrown around, and that was one of my favorite movies growing up. And
that was everybody's favorite movie our age.
Oh yeah, I
remember coming back from the summer and like what did you do over the summer? Everybody said they saw Twister.
Oh yeah. And at the time, I was really into meteorology, so I basically,
You dork.
I know, right?
Yeah, what a loser.
It was weird. Yeah, it was. I had a little club with me and me. No, I really wanted to be a storm chaser when I was a kid, and like that movie came out at right at the perfect moment. So I begged my mom to go see it, and then we saw it, and I loved it. So having said that, our should we put that conversation to rest?
Sure.
I think so.
Okay.
Stick a needle in it, call it done.
Yep.
That was so bad. I don't know.
Yeah. No, but so this week's episode, we're talking about worst episodes ever.
You gotta say it like comic book guy.
I know.
Ever.
I wanted to cue up.
Do it again, Tiny.
Worst episode ever.
Nice. I was gonna cue it up on YouTube, but I forgot.
Yeah.
But the worst episode ever. It's not necessarily the literal worst episode of any given show, but we're talking about those episodes of shows that I think across the board we love all these shows that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
But those kind of lesser episodes that didn't really grab us or didn't really interest us that much. So let's go around the table. Who wants to start?
I can start if you want.
Sure. Okay, sweet. Go right ahead.
Cool. The first one I'm going to mention is from a little show called 24.
Oh.
The year was 2001. Nice. The man was Kiefer Sutherland. No, actually, this is from the 6th season, which was like 2007. Yes. That was a show that kind of went on a bit long. I mean, it's a format that you could make it a long series and it could still be good, but they had the same character was in every single episode. Jack Bauer, Kiefer Sutherland, and so it's like, after 8 seasons, it's like I'm just kind of sick of this guy. I think we could. I don't know. I love character development and everything, and they kept it interesting, but I think they maxed out the character by the end of like the 6th season, probably.
Yeah,
they should have let it go after that.
Yeah.
So anyways, the show went on too long. It drug a little bit. I think they could have maybe condensed some of it down. But during season 6, there was a part that bothered me. It was the episode, they don't have titles, but, because it's a very linear show, they can just use the time to title the episode. So this was 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on the 6th day of 24. And I don't remember the full context of the plot. Probably Jack trying to stop a terrorist.
Do you want me to help you out with it?
No, don't. Okay. I don't care.
Because I got it queued up for you.
But essentially, Jack has to interrogate is not the right word. He has to get information from someone to, try to stop this terrorist plot. And the someone that he has to get information from is an autistic guy. And it's played by an actor who obviously isn't autistic. So any time an actor, portrays someone with a mental handicap, it's always a gamble. Go to the you never go full retard line from Tropic Thunder. It's always sketchy. It rarely works, and this is one of the situations where it didn't work. The problem that I had with it so much was that I don't think they ever, maybe I have this wrong, but I don't think they specified exactly what kind of handicap the guy had. I'm looking on IMDb and it says it was an autistic guy, which that's kind of what I gathered looking at the character, but they never actually came out and said, well, he's autistic or he has this or that. And so it was, maybe that's a good thing that they don't specify what it is, because that way the actor doesn't have to be, they don't have to be within a framework. They can kind of just be like, well, the guy's just mentally handicapped. Just leave it at that,
Right.
Mm-hmm. But I just had a problem with it because it was so, I don't know, it was just so kind of hokey. It was unnecessary. Yeah. It was an interesting way to see, it was a different way to see Jack work. Mm-hmm. Because he had interrogated hundreds of people over the series. It's what he does, and that can get repetitive, obviously. And so throwing in something like that into the mix changes it up. So I appreciated that aspect of it, but I just think they could have gone a different way. He could have, interrogated a child or something, or I don't know, something like that. The actor who played the character was fine. I don't really have an issue with his performance, but just the fact that they chose to do it, I didn't care for it. I thought it was clunky and weird.
If I remember correctly, it wasn't so much that he had to get information out of him; it was that the autistic guy and his brother were not conspirators, or they were kind of they were kind of innocent. They're kind of complicit in these activities that were part of this bigger scope. They had been
deceived, sort of.
Yeah,
They didn't realize they were helping a terrorist.
Yeah. So what Jack had to do was wire him up.
That's right. It's even worse.
Yeah, because they were going to be the terrorist guy was going to come and get information or give them information or something like that. But the kind of moments with Jack and the autistic guy, it kind of played a little bit too close to being a very special episode of 24. Like in that, not special in that context, but I mean,
poor choice of words.
No, we know what you mean.
Yeah, like kind of just
we know what a very special episode means.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's an episode that's just like, okay, well, this week Jack is after school special. Exactly. Yeah. And so, and it did show kind of Jack in a more tender version of him, but especially because that season, a lot of a lot of that season was about Jack reclaiming his humanity, because in between seasons 5 and 6, spoiler alert, he was imprisoned by the Chinese and tortured and all that.
Season 5 finale was so awesome.
It was so great. So
that would
great.
have been such an awesome ending to the series.
It would have been, and I also really like the end of season 6 as a collection of the entire series, honestly.
Yeah.
But
and
season
there's
5,
more to come, so
there is, yes. Yeah, so it was, yeah, I mean, it was, in the grand scope of it, there are much worse things that happened in 24 in the later days. I
had a problem with the federal government going, well, let's hinge this entire investigation of saving millions of people on an autistic guy.
Yeah.
And let's hinge it on him essentially being wired up and going undercover, and like, I don't know, it was like he was like, it wasn't just he was part of the investigation a little bit, he was the linchpin of the investigation. Like,
right.
If he would have screwed up, that would have screwed up the entire investigation. It's like they relied entirely on an autistic guy. It was just kind of...
But you're forgetting one thing, Tiny. They were running out of time. No, but yeah, and there is more 24 to come, and I'm hoping that it's going to be good. Did you guys see the trailer?
Yep.
I haven't watched it yet.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't watch the show when it was on, so the trailer meant nothing to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that I mentioned when it was first announced was that Live Another Day sounded a little bit like a Bond title.
Oh, it sounds more than a little bit like a Bond title.
Exactly. And once I saw that trailer, I was like, it was intentional. So I'm kind of eager to see it. So,
Yeah,
but
I'll watch
anyway,
it.
yeah. Mike, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I can go next.
Sweet.
I want to talk about what was one of perhaps the best sitcoms of the 90s, Family Matters.
Okay.
Nice.
Which we all know. It's not really so much secret trivia anymore that it's a spinoff of Perfect Strangers. But anyway, the episode I want to talk about is called Substitute Son from season 6, episode 15.
Mm-hmm.
The A plot is actually just kind of another family story about how Eddie doesn't have time to hang out with Carl, so Carl hangs out with Waldo, Geraldo, Faldo, and it's like substitute son. They get along. That's not the problem I have with the episode. This one sticks out to me in particular because it's the episode where Urkel created Bruce Juice.
Bruce Juice.
Bruce Juice. Let me go on. At the beginning of the episode, Urkel and Laura go to a bar where some ruffians call Laura a bimbo, and Urkel decides to get revenge. He won't stand for this kind of tomfoolery. So Laura wants him to be Stefan. If you guys remember, Urkel created Cool Juice to turn him into Stefan.
Yeah.
Which I'll get into in a second. So he says no, and he decides that what would be better is if he created Bruce Juice, which allowed Urkel to transform into Bruce Lee Urkel. I could stop there.
Okay.
I could really stop there.
That is cool.
Wow.
I hate it so much. I hate that the episode for me, it was the true jump the shark moment of Family Matters. Ratings dropped at a point, so they decided to bring in Stefan, which I'm okay with. It's a little hokey, but that, there were still some good episodes with Stefan. But after that, it continued. The Bruce Juice episode is the point where the show went from being about a family and their quirky neighbor to Urkel's sci-fi adventures.
Okay.
And he became a scientist. He did Bruce Juice. They did at the beginning of season 7. He shrank himself. Urkel shrank himself and Carl. There was a ventriloquist dummy. There was a dream sequence that was a ventriloquist dummy that killed all the Winslow family.
That actually sounds kind of awesome.
It's super creepy, but it was ridiculous.
Right.
He makes Elvis juice. There's time travel, there's teleportation, and even Urkel in space.
Oh, wow.
To cap it all off, because he is tired of going back and forth between himself and Stefan, Urkel decides to clone himself, making his clone the Stefan version of himself, and Stefan goes off and does his own thing. The show just got ridiculous, and I really point to the Bruce Juice episode, Substitute Son, as that episode, and it's just a shame how good that show used to be, and just kind of what it turned into. And that is the episode I hate the most. There might be hokier episodes and worse episodes, but I think that one can shoulder a lot of the blame for what became of Family Matters.
Wow.
Do you guys remember the episode at all?
I don't.
Yeah, I didn't. I kind of watched Family Matters kind of in passing, and I have no memory of it being that off the wall. I remember Stefan.
Yeah.
But
right, and everybody was like, "Well, Stefan was kind of silly, but it was still a good show."
Yeah, I remember thinking
that's
like,
the lasting memory.
Yeah, I remember thinking, "Oh wow, that's Urkel, but normal."
Yeah,
but I never knew that it went that deep. That's crazy.
It is. It's very crazy. There's a line at the end. Personally, I love Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is kind of a connection I have with my dad. We used to rent Bruce Lee movies, and I've been a Bruce Lee fan for a long time. There's a line at the end where he turns back into Urkel and then he hits a board, and then the Bruce Lee Urkel kind of personality comes out and he says, "Boards do hit back," which I hate because it's a bastardization of the line from Enter the Dragon.
Yeah.
About boards don't hit back. It's just awful. It's just an awful episode.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I only watched that show like in syndication, but I did love it. I didn't watch it like, it's Thursday night, time for Family Matters, but
yeah.
Right.
yeah, it was
on TGIF.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
right. But I only watched it in syndication. I remember, they'd have like 2 episodes in a row or whatever, and like every time I was like, okay, well this is going to be a better episode because it's young Urkel.
Yeah.
So I know what you mean. Like, the first 4 or 5 seasons were so much better. Like whenever you saw an episode from the first couple seasons, you were like, all right, well this will be a good one then.
Right.
And then
Totally.
I remember the I remember there being time travel. I don't remember the context and exactly what happened, but I remember thinking, even as like a 9 or 10-year-old, I was like, this is pretty stupid.
It was.
Yeah.
It really was.
Okay.
So that's my submission.
Okay. Mine is from Scrubs. It's from season 3, kind of the tail end of season 3, if I'm not mistaken. It's it's not the season finale. It might be the second to last episode. It involves Carla and Turk's rehearsal dinner. And it kind of, if memory serves, it's a good indicator for why I dislike the character of JD so much, and why that hatred for that character kind of evolved into just a dislike of Zach Braff. The entire season, Elliot is with a guy, and so JD's like, they do the kind of whole Ross and Rachel kind of thing where they love each other or whatever. So the whole episode is like, his ex-girlfriend says like, well, you only want what you can't have. So this is actually an arc over a couple episodes, I think. So he basically takes Elliot from the guy, and he confesses his love, and they fall in love and all that. And then the episode ends with them cuddling, and then all of a sudden JD like looks into the camera, and in his head is, I don't want her. And I'm like, you're a douchebag.
Oh.
Yeah, and then it gets worse because at the I'm sorry, I know we said episode, but this is a couple episodes, but it's an arc that at the rehearsal dinner for his friend's wedding, he tells her, like in front of everyone, all of their closest friends, coworkers, everything, that he doesn't love her.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's like, it gets to a point where, why are we rooting for this character? Why are we supposed to still root for this character when he's such an unmitigated douchebag? And it's just, he's incredibly self-centered and very, very just unlikable.
Do you think that's kind of an aspect of those kinds of sitcoms, though? Because you could make a similar argument against, Ted Mosby from How I Met Your Mother. He's annoying a lot of the time. He's kind of, he's not very sympathetic a lot of the time, and so.
Well, yeah,
I think that's part
I think he's a good guy.
I think
Ted's a good guy.
Yeah, that's the thing. He's not actively hurting people for his own self-interest. He's annoying at times, sure. I have an episode on my list that we'll get to in a bit later about that. But his journey is a journey of finding love and all that. And he stumbles up here and there throughout the way. Like there's that episode where he tells a story about being hooked by Carrie Underwood. And then in the story, he tells a story about how he had a girl on the hook and how he was a jerk and all that. So he has that kind of remorse, or at least, well, that's also due to the narrator.
That's true. Maybe that's just an unfortunate, like it's easier to do that whenever you have a sitcom that it has a main character, as opposed to something like Friends or Friends just basically had, 5 or 6 characters and they kind of focused on all of them separately. Whereas if you get something where there's a main character, it's easier to kind of write them into a corner where it's like, well, this guy really isn't that sympathetic anymore.
That's true. That's a good point. And what gets me is that Elliot and JD still ended up together.
Yeah.
And it was kind of just
in the end of the show. I never saw the end of it.
Yeah, it was kind of an afterthought. It was I don't know. It was like kind of toward the end of the series or end of the show, and they were like, you know what? Let's just get them together. And I think they played that up like they were like, yeah, we're back together, and everyone's like, we don't care. Congratulations, but who cares?
That's funny.
Yeah. So, Tiny, what's your next episode?
The next one I have is a show I don't think you guys have watched. It's from The Sopranos.
You don't know me. You don't know me.
Have you watched The Sopranos?
No, I haven't watched it.
I haven't
Shut
watched
up.
it either.
Booyah. Just kidding. It's from The Sopranos. Unfortunately, it's maybe a bit spoilery, but not really. Sort of.
Okay.
Statute of limitations is up.
Yeah, I mean the episode's 8 years old.
Right.
So. The episode, it's not a bad episode. It's kind of, maybe I just kind of don't like the idea of it, but Tony Soprano gets injured mortally. He almost dies. And he gets put in the hospital and he's in a coma. And the episode is basically his friends and family like kind of build a vigil around him, like a 24/7 vigil around him while he's in this coma. It lasts for, I don't know, a week or two or something like that. But what they show is they show Tony basically hallucinates while he's in the coma, and they show his hallucination.
Okay.
Which that could be a really interesting thing and could be really cool for a different show.
Yeah, not for
The Sopranos. For a simple-minded thug, monsterish kind of person, it's just so out of place. And in his hallucination, he essentially hallucinates that he's an identityless man. That's not a word. He's a man who he can't figure out who he is, basically, and he's this like businessman who's on a trip to California, and he doesn't like Tony Soprano, the character, has a really thick New Jersey accent and like speaks like a gangster, but like the guy that he's hallucinating has like no diction to his voice. He's just like probably some dude from the Midwest somewhere, and he's basically just trying to figure out who, like he loses his wallet, the hallucinated character. He loses his wallet and he can't figure out who he is. It's, like I said, for a certain show it may have worked, but just not. It was so out of place for The Sopranos like the outside, the exterior influences of his actual existence. Like when people would keep a vigil over him, some of his subordinates, I guess you could say,
Right.
would come and talk to him, and it would annoy him. And so, like in the hallucination, he'd be in his hotel room, and that annoyance would manifest itself in someone banging on the wall of the hotel room, like a noisy neighbor.
Okay.
It was just, I just really didn't care for it, and it wasn't any. If it had developed his character more, I would have maybe been okay with it, but it didn't really add anything to his character, you know. It was just really kind of pointless to have him hallucinate for a whole episode. This whole other story, they wanted us to get involved and like invest in this other character, and then it just stopped, and like it wasn't really addressed after he woke up and came back.
Weird.
It was really pointless. I didn't really care for that aspect.
Sounds like something that would be better served as just a scene or a sequence in an episode, as kind of a B or C story.
Yeah.
Not devoting an entire episode to it. That's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't care for it. So that show really just fell off a lot, in my opinion. Like it.
Really?
I think it only had 7 seasons, maybe.
Yeah, I think it was 6, but they split the last.
Yeah, they split. There you go. I can't remember, but ironically, it went on. It felt like it went on too long. I think it was like 8 years, but only 6 seasons.
Yeah.
And it just, even with just that amount, it's like 90 episodes. Like it could have used maybe 65 or 70. Not quite so much. They kind of drug it out, I think. So.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a good show though. I mean, it's worth a watch.
I still need to watch it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Mike, what's next on your list?
Boy Meets World as time goes by from season 7.
Okay.
You could pick plenty of episodes from season 7, but this is perhaps the worst. With 3 episodes left in the series, this is the third to last episode, they decide that Corey and Topanga are getting in a fight because Topanga studies too much and Corey simply wants to laze around and watch cartoons. So Corey begs her to just hang out, and she decides that she's going to clean the closet. And in the closet, she finds a time continuum vortex. Once again, I could stop there.
Yes, you
so
could.
she goes into it, and then she's in this weird, like, noir-esque world where she doesn't remember her identity, and so she hires a gumshoe played by Eric, who is not Eric, at the Shangri-La Cafe. She becomes a waitress named Trixie, and she attracts the interest of Rory, who is Corey's counterpart and owns the cafe. And she can't remember who she is, but she somebody says something about a time continuum vortex, and she has a flashback, so she kind of remembers that she's out of her own time, but she doesn't remember exactly why. So, I'm not going to keep going with the details. It's just so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
It's a stupid episode anywhere, but with 3 episodes left, it totally derailed any modicum of momentum they might have had building toward the finale. You could really say that about a lot of episodes in season 7, like I said. I just recently watched it last year, and it's pretty awful. And I remember liking the last episode of Boy Meets World, but as a whole, it's pretty trash television.
Yeah.
And this, as time goes by, time travel noir episode is just laughably bad and laughably out of place. And it's a real bummer for a show that I remembered loving so much. And then I watched this episode a year ago, and I was just like, what in the world? Why would they do this? It's a blessing, really, that there was no season 8. And they decided to just end it at season. It got a finale. It's not like it was canceled, but
right.
it's a good thing there was no more time for episodes like this, because in a show that dipped in quality, this was the low point for sure. Do you guys remember it?
Wow. I actually do. I remember it, and I have to laugh because in your description you said, this is just so funny to me that you said, and then someone mentions time continuum vortex in the noir world, and I'm just like,
yeah,
that's
exactly.
That's so stupid.
The gumshoe Eric says, "Do you know anything about a time continuum vortex?" Which, come on,
that's so silly. It's
ridiculous.
Yeah, it's that's a shame. It's because it was a really good show, and I could see how. I don't know. I didn't see it in sequence. I saw it in syndication, so I wasn't aware that was within like the end run of the series.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing that, I mean, I can totally see how that just completely derails it. And you mentioned that Eric isn't Eric. That entire like last season or last couple seasons, he was a caricature. If I remember correctly,
like the last three. I mean, he in the noir world, he wasn't. He was just like Gumshoe. Like he wasn't even Eric.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even other than that, he just got dumber and dumber. I don't know that that's a word. He got dumb.
He got more stupider.
More stupider.
I didn't watch that show actually, so I don't.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a shame. I don't know what happened there. Did they had some more of those kind of like special silly episodes, didn't they? Or am I mistaken?
There were, yeah, but I don't know that they were as silly as that. I mean,
Right.
I remember the episode in, I want to say around season 5, maybe 6, where Corey and Topanga break up, and then they kind of do like the Scream type of thing.
Where
which
Sean,
I loved.
Oh, it was great.
But other than that, I can't think of any more that are as ridiculous as that one.
Right. Ugh.
So.
Well, that's too bad.
Yeah, it was. It's disappointing. It really, when we rewatched it last year, the final episode still works, but so much of what they did to build up to it was so disappointing that it's hard to, like, my lasting memory right now of Boy Meets World is that it was not nearly as good as I remember it, and I hate that.
Yeah. It's a shame when something that you care about really tarnishes its image. Like when we released our choppy episode last week.
Yeah.
Okay, should I go to mine?
Do it.
My next one is from the series The Office. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. Even after it dipped in quality from after Steve Carell left, it was still an enjoyable show. Actually, while I was on bed rest from my gallbladder, a lot of the stuff I watched that wasn't movies was just episodes of The Office of the later seasons. But this comes from season 6. The episode is called The Banker. It's where it's where they have a guy come into the office to kind of assess the company's worth, I guess. Because they're going to sell it or something. I don't know. So they have a clip show in the office, which is something that I'm not a fan of clip shows. Especially now, you could get away with it with Friends in the 90s. Cause that's just how sitcoms were. But this is kind of a high concept sitcom with its documentary style and all that. And what really annoyed me on such a deep level was that they have it staring in their face. They have a documentary style show having a clip show, and they don't use any of the format to facilitate it. So it's basically this guy goes through, and it's like a standard sitcom clip show. They're talking, they play clips, but why couldn't it have been Michael losing something, or Michael trying to find something and then him asking the documentarians to play footage from the show that they've been filming for 10 years. That would have been a much more organic way to do it. And it would have poked fun at the format, and it would have been good. But instead they kind of went on this, they just went to this thing that was just really bland and just highly forgettable. So
I agree.
that just bugged me.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of that episode either.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Yeah.
You know, interesting bit of trivia about that episode. I read the original title of it was Mother.
Damn it.
Very nice.
You can edit that out.
I'll keep it.
It doesn't make sense.
It
But
doesn't. I'll keep it, and I'll keep it on for B-roll.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's mine. They could have been so much better. It just came across as lazy. Maybe there are extenuating circumstances. Maybe they needed that clip show because they needed time for something, or maybe their timing was off, so they needed to just rush a clip show to kind of keep on schedule. But still, I mean, I just hate I hate that a show of that caliber, and it was still at a pretty high caliber at that point. I just hate that they put themselves into that position and that they played it out that way.
bummer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
So Tiny.
Yep.
What's next for you?
This is the last one I could think of, actually.
Okay.
Not sure if it fully qualifies because it's not a bad episode per se. There's just a part of it that I really didn't like.
Okay.
The show is The Shield, and it is the 6th episode of the first season. It's called Cherry Poppers.
Mm-hmm.
It's the episode is actually a pretty solid episode. It's very dark, and it shows it illustrated how far that show was willing to go with their authenticity and their shock value. Because it's an incredibly disturbing subject matter. It involves the main strike team. Sort of, they find out about this. It's sort of like a brothel, basically, where it's this brothel where obviously guys come and have sex with girls, but it's worse because they're like teenage girls that have been kidnapped, and it's incredibly disturbing. And the main character, Vic Mack, he goes undercover and visits the place to kind of get an inside track on it. And they end up busting it and breaking it down, which is great. But then there's this girl who's like 13, she's like this Asian girl who was kidnapped from some Asian country and brought here for this purpose. And she's incredibly damaged, and like it's like she thinks the only way that she can communicate with men is to just have sex with them, which is just incredibly disturbing. And so that's really interesting. That's a shocking episode. It's great to look at, but the actress they got to play the 13-year-old girl was just really annoying, I guess. It's such a weird thing for me to focus on in the episode because, like I said, it's so powerful. But she, I have a feeling she was an American girl who just happened to be Asian ethnically, and so they were like, "Well, we need a teenage girl. She needs to be Asian, and the character's from Asia, so she needs to use an accent." And she just she uses such fake like Asian accent, like Asian
That's
speak,
awkward.
like dropping words out. Like she keeps talking. She refers to herself in the
Third person.
Yeah. She's like, Ling, go here with you now, or whatever her name is.
Yeah.
And like, it's just really, it's really grating to me. Like if they had gotten an actual Asian girl, it would have been so much, or like a girl from Asia. That's what I mean. It would have been so much better. It really bothers me whenever I watch that episode. It's just, and like Vic tries to talk to her and like, calm her down and explain things to her that, the world isn't quite so dark as she's been exposed to. And it's just, it's hard watching an incredible actor like Michael Chiklis interact with that character played to that caliber.
That sucks.
Yeah.
It really bothers me. It affects my enjoyment of the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was very stereotypical in it, and yeah. I looked her up on IMDb. She was born in the Philippines, but I don't know. I don't know her history. I don't know if she came to America early or whatever. But as of 2004, she's studying to be a hypnotherapist. So there's that.
Oh.
The only way the character could have been more stereotypical is if they got her a job at like a laundry house or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just basically kind of had a problem with the character. I think they wrote a really good episode, and they were filming it perfectly. It was really disturbing and dark, and it sticks with you. Like, it's a really, really hard episode to watch. And then there's just this one part where it's just like, oh, okay, this sucks. And it just takes me out of the episode, and it's bothersome. So,
Okay.
But it was their first season, and
Yeah.
you know, that show found its stride really well. I think it was around the time where cable television was evolving, and the first season or two, they had like 20 some episodes. They were trying to make it like a regular network show, which it never was that. The show was too unique to really fit into that box. And so after a couple seasons, they really found their stride, and they had shorter seasons and much tighter stories and everything like that. So that was in their first season. So
yeah. They had 13 episodes across the board, except for season 3 that they had 16, I think.
Are you sure?
Positive.
I thought the first season was like 20 episodes.
13.
Really?
I guarantee it, 110%. 13, and then they had 16 for season 3, I think, and then another 13, and then 11 and 13.
He's looking at the DVDs right now, Tiny.
I'm staring at my bookshelf.
Don't challenge him.
No, but I'm positive. It was 15 for season 3. But yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
Well, I'm an ass.
No, you're fine. No, so yeah, I understand that. I for one thought the Shield never really had a bad episode. I can understand where you're coming from, though.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad episode per se, but it was just that one aspect.
Just
of it
annoying.
that bothers me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Mike, what's next on yours?
The third show I want to talk about is it's an episode of Nip Tuck, which I don't know how familiar you guys are with that show.
Not very.
Never seen an episode.
They called it a disturbingly perfect drama, and for those seasons, it really was pretty perfect. It was pretty excellent. I loved how it played with these people making other people perfect, but of course their lives were hideous. It was just brilliantly done, as Ryan Murphy is wont to do for 1 or 2 seasons before his shows kind of go off the deep end.
Okay.
So anyway, this is a season 6 episode. There were 6 total seasons, and the last season was split into 2. This is episode 9, and a couple things about it really rubbed me the wrong way. The main storyline, the A storyline, is the introduction of Brendan McNamara, which is the, up to this point, never before mentioned long-lost brother of one of the main characters, Sean, played by Dylan Walsh. And I just hated it so much. What I always liked to say about Nip Tuck is that it was a love story between these two guys who were best friends. And multiple times on the show, they called each other brothers. I mean, Christian Troy and Sean McNamara, the two characters. There are times, and I wish I could quote it, but I have no doubt that Sean said, "You are like the brother I never had," in an episode. Which is apparently not true because there's a Brendan McNamara. And it was just incredibly frustrating. Totally like they were just scraping the bottom of the barrel for plot points. Mm-hmm. And they came up with this one about his brother is a meth addict who comes to town and needs some help getting his face fixed up and his friend's nose fixed up so they can start a new life because they're getting clean. And of course, Christian gets jealous and does a few things to show that Brandon is, once a dirtbag, always a dirtbag. And so you kind of see how, like Sean wants to have a relationship with his real brother, but Christian wants him to realize that it's not blood that makes family. And it's just so poorly done and such a slap in the face to what we knew about the relationship between these two men that they would throw in a completely never before mentioned character and do this to these two characters. Not only that, but because it was one of the last episodes of the entire show, similar to the way Boy Meets World did it, it totally slowed the momentum. It was pretty self-contained in that aspect, except for the other thing that happens, the B-plot, is one of the worst things Christian ever does to Sean. And there's a lot of times where we see that Christian has a heart, but he also does terrible things to the people that are closest to him. They have this argument about there's this guy who wants to take a loan out from the company, McNamara Troy, their practice. And so he wants to take $400,000 out, and he does it behind Sean's back, which ends up being a catalyst for something later down the line. But to me, it was too far, and I really, really hated that about Christian, that they would deconstruct the relationship between these two men and then build it back up only to be ruined again. So much about that show was just rehashed plots from early on that it really kind of stumbled toward the finish line, and it really bummed me out. And Benny Nilsson is the worst of them all.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I never watched it, but I can see any time that they do that in a show, and it's such a hard trope to really, or it's such an easy thing to avoid, but it's such an easy, it's easy writing. It's easy manufacture of plot.
Yeah. And that's kind of why I chose it. It's just a pretty obvious example of one of those fouls.
Yeah. That's cool. Good pick.
And I hate it. Thank you.
Yep. My next one is actually from the dearly beloved by us, How I Met Your Mother.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's the season 1 finale called Come On. And it's the one thing that I dislike about the show. I love the show so much as a concept, as just everything about it I love. But there's one thing in this finale that I was just like, why did they do this? It's the fact that Ted's last ditch effort to win Robin's heart is to try to do a Native American rain dance to make it rain to have her trip spoiled.
Yeah.
By far the dumbest thing I've ever seen in that series.
Yeah.
Or many other series. And it's amplified by the fact that anytime I see Josh Radnor dance in the show, he dances like such a dorky way. It grates on my nerves on like a cellular level. Like I can't stand it so much. He looks so dorky and stupid. But when he's doing this Native American rain dance, and it's so dumb. It's really dumb. And it really makes you question the sanity of it, and knowing that he's our narrator in the future really makes you question the validity of a lot of the stories. Which, I mean, it's an unreliable narrator in itself, but still.
Yeah.
So anyway, and I mean, the end game of it is that he wins Robin and he runs to her apartment and yells. And I actually really like the line where he's like, "Come down here," and then she's like, "No, you come up," and then he's like, "No, come down here," and then he's like, he says something like, "I made it rain today. That's what I did today." I was like, I kind of like that line, but it's also like, you didn't make it rain, dude.
Yeah.
And then they play on it kind of later in a later season where they're like, they're talking about it after they've broken up, and he says like something like, "I made it rain," and then she's like, "No, you didn't." He's like, "Yes, I did." And it's just like, kind of this back and forth that's like, it's kind of silly. It's poking fun at it, but still, the fact that it wasn't so much that he did it. I mean, him doing it and not being a big part of that arc of the series is egregious and is a problem for me. But the fact that it happened in the season finale, was also a huge problem. And it being the first season finale really makes me question how much they wanted to continue as a series.
Where's your sense of romance, Matt?
Yeah, Jesus.
He made it rain for the girl.
He made it rain.
No, he didn't.
How do you know?
Because that's not how it works.
It's a TV show, though. It's fiction. Maybe he did make it rain.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess so.
It is.
Think about that, did you?
It is a good point.
Yeah.
No, I agree. It's pretty silly.
Yeah, it's really silly. So Tiny, you're out, right?
Yeah, that's all I've had. That's all I came up with. I actually like the shows that I watch, guys.
Yeah. You know what? To be honest
kidding.
with you, when you first pitched this topic, I was like, well, I like the shows I like.
But it's all about those times when the writers don't really perform for us when they release
It is. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Case in point, if you don't mind, Tiny, that I'll take a turn here.
Sure.
And I think you guys have at least seen this. Case in point, what I think is one of the greatest shows, at least the greatest sitcom of all time, Seinfeld. If there's one bad episode, it's the last episode.
Sure.
And I don't think that I'm the only person who's ever said that.
Right.
Yeah.
They had a long-standing deal with Seinfeld where there was no sentimentality, no hugs, and everything was just for the sake of comedy. But for a finale, maybe the part of me that has a heart wants some of that. And there was absolutely none of it. And it was really just the best example of why these people are such awful, awful people. And it was a weird way to end the show. No original jokes. It ended up being essentially a pseudo clip show. And it really they just paraded in guest stars and said, well, I bet that'll be enough. Yeah. And it really rubbed me the wrong way. What do you guys think?
It was kind of the lowest common denominator. Like they were like, well, we're already one of the best shows of all time. We already have that designation. And they knew that people were going to tune in no matter what. And I think you're right. I think they just wanted to sort of show off a little bit for the last episode. They didn't really care about the substance as much.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mind it. The scenario was really funny.
I agree.
The whole bystander thing, Good Samaritan thing was just a classic Seinfeld scenario that would have been awesome in a normal episode for that show. But because it was the finale, it was kind of lost. So I agree with you to an extent. Yeah, it could have been better.
I remember when I watched it live, and their sentence was that they would spend a year in prison. And I remember thinking, okay, so in a year the show will be back, right?
That's, as a small tangent, that's kind of an interesting common theme in series finales, final seasons or whatever. Things is that like I can think three off the top of my head. Seinfeld has they're in jail for 1 year. How I Met Your Mother, they're gearing towards Marshall and Lily going to Rome for 1 year. And even and even Wings, the end of the series is they're going to Venice for a year.
The Office as well.
The Office as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Boy Meets World, a couple of them go to the Peace Corps for a year.
Yeah. So it's
Peace Corps might be 2 years.
Okay.
But anyway.
But yeah, it's kind of a weird thing that I noticed. But I'd like to play quickly a little bit of almost devil's advocate for Seinfeld. I haven't seen that finale in years, and so I don't remember specifically how bad it was played out. But as a concept, I can kind of appreciate that. I can appreciate them wanting to pay tribute to the stuff that they've done over the years, over the near decade that they've been on the air.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of reminds me of It's Always Sunny. They had that episode in, I think it was season 3, where Charlie fills out a form and puts the bar up for as the prize of a dance competition. Or as like a long-standing dance competition. And in that episode is just basically all the people that they've wronged trying to win the bar from them.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire time I was watching it, I was thinking this would make an awesome series finale.
That's a great episode.
It's a fantastic episode. Also features Glenn Howerton's wife. She's really hot. But no, but so I can kind of see where they were going with that. It's a shame that it apparently didn't really play out the way that they did. But I did like the idea of the characters getting their comeuppance.
Yeah, that's the thing. The concept is good. It's just not very funny.
Right.
And that's the problem. It's just not a funny episode on a show where, some of the funniest episodes of all time were born from. This was just not a funny finale. It's disappointing.
Yeah.
Fair enough. That's a shame.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Should I go on to my last one on the list?
Yeah.
Do it.
All right.
Take us home.
Yes. This is... It's no surprise. I'm a huge fan of Lost. I will defend that show to the grave. I will take a bullet for a DVD of Lost if I can. But, and the scary thing is I'm 100% serious there. But... There is no mistaking they had at least one bad episode. Now, when we first started, when we were the pre-show of this episode, I mentioned I'll find one for Lost, and Tiny mentioned he went right to Expose from season 3, which I will say I like that episode quite a bit.
AKA the pointless episode.
Yeah, the Nikki and Paolo.
Yeah.
It was the writers saying, hey, we're sorry, we thought this would be a good idea for the season. We realize it's not. We're going to kill these characters off. But as a standalone, it's actually pretty fantastic. But as a standalone, just as a concept, I mean, but behind the scenes concept, I mean. But as an episode, it's a fun little standalone mystery episode, I think. So, sure. But anyway, the episode that I chose...
Tiny doesn't sound convinced.
No. And I'm sure that whoever's listening to this who knows it is not convinced either, but I'm an apologist. But I can't forgive the show for its worst episode that is just across the board. Everyone dislikes it. It's season 3's Stranger in a Strange Land, named after I can't remember the writer's name, a sci-fi writer's book. But anyway, the episode is about Jack, and it solves the long-standing mystery that everyone wanted to know, what his tattoos mean. Which, if you can't sense the sarcasm, I did not give a what his tattoos meant. And the reason why this was such a big mystery is because I think it's in the first season, in the first few episodes, Jack and Kate are kind of going back and forth, and they're kind of flirting and talking, and then it's just a throwaway line. It's a complete throwaway line where Kate's like, what do your tattoos mean or whatever, and Jack's like, oh, I can't tell you that, and then they walk away, and then it's actually a really funny scene. They tell Charlie, like they pass by Charlie. Charlie says something, and then Kate's like, hey, Charlie, why don't you ask Jack about his tattoos? And then Charlie's like, oh, you have inside jokes. That's lovely. So it's a cute little thing in that. But on
Lost, there were no throwaway lines.
Exactly. Every diehard fan who was just incredibly, they're the people who hated the finale. They're the ones who concentrated solely on the mystery. So they hear that line, not realizing, oh, it's comic relief in a show about mystery and drama and people dying and people experiencing hardships on a deserted island. there's a throwaway line, and then they ran with it. They're like, okay, what do they mean? We need to find every screenshot of every single shot that includes his tattoos, even the 5 that's on his arm.
Okay. This is a conversation that you and I have had for a long time that I think is grounds for an even bigger conversation about that show.
Yeah.
They asked for that.
Okay. It's.
If you buy the DVD set, there's a hidden DVD underneath the thing. So why would you not pull up every little thing you could find looking for a hidden DVD? They asked for that.
They were still breaking their own ground. They were breaking ground in television in terms of having a mystery show. They had no idea that they were going to run with it that much. They had no idea that the fans were going to be that devoted to every minute detail. And they didn't realize that the fans were not going to view it as a TV show, which is also ultimately its downfall and ultimately why people hated the finale, because the finale paid tribute. I'm not going to spoil it, but it paid tribute to the characters in an incredibly meaningful and really heartfelt way. The entire last season was all about the characters and the journey they did. It wasn't about the mystery, because the mystery was secondary. The mystery was always secondary, but the fans who devoted themselves to the show set themselves up for their own downfall of being disappointed, because it's always been a character-based show from the start. The only thing was that there was a backdrop of mystery. So I don't think that the show was setting itself up for that kind of outcry and everything.
I agree. I'm going to interject here. I don't think they were asking for that, because they made a show for a certain audience.
Yeah.
And that's what made that show so unique, is that it was a network show that was for a very specific audience. It's not Law and Order SVU. It's not whatever. It was for a specific diehard sci-fi audience that was going to focus on character development, and it was going to be a show for people that don't need every single question answered, as long as there's quality, as long as we can connect with it. And that's what...
But they asked a lot of questions. The one I remember when I started watching it, and I stopped kind of toward the end of season 2, Matt.
You stopped right before one of the best episode endings I've ever seen in the show.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, and so I stopped watching it. And I remember starting a list of all the mysteries that they put in place. And Matt was like, oh, you might not want to do that. A lot of those go unanswered.
Not so much unanswered, but they go...
The conclusions are not satisfying?
Not so much unsatisfying. It's just that those questions, they don't spell them out. They have implied kind of things. Like, you see one thing, it's a sprawling kind of thing. Like, you see one mystery, think, okay, well, why is that there? You see another thing, it's like, okay, well, that's probably why that's there, but also what's this here? It's kind of this thing that's this ever evolving organism that,
okay.
Yeah.
The one I remember was, what Michael's son's name? Walt?
Yeah.
Walt. I remember saying, oh, that's interesting. What happens with that? And you're like, well, and you kind of gave me the same line you just gave me about all the other things.
Well, no, that was because the actor was a child actor, and they had to kind of write around that. But they don't explain why he's special, but they don't write him off as being like, okay, well, he's just a crazy kid or anything like that. They show that he's special and everything, and he has these kind of supernatural powers. They just don't have an episode surrounding why he has that, because by the end of the show, it kind of becomes this entire other thing, this actual kind of religious allegory of good versus evil.
The show in general?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's kind of...
I don't know. I'm coming from a place of someone who hasn't seen all of it, so I apologize for that.
Oh, no, that's fine. Yeah, but it was... But the tattoo thing just... It played out like... It played out like the writers were like, well, crap, we've got to go and tell what these tattoos are, because the fans keep asking about them. And what's funny is that there's a 5 on Matthew Fox's arm, and the 5 is because of Party of Five. So
why did they feel like they needed to answer that aspect, but they didn't answer all the other things they didn't answer in the finale? Which, of course, I don't know what they didn't answer because I haven't seen the finale. But you get what I'm saying.
It's not so much that show. What was partly brilliant about the show is that anything that you saw on the screen could have significance, but it didn't necessarily have to.
Right.
That was part of the mystery, that was interesting. It's like, well, is this going to play out? Is this going to mean something? Does his tattoo mean something? And for some reason, they decided to make his tattoo mean something, but it didn't have to. There's so many other things in the show where we thought the exact same thing. Does that mean something? Is that going to come up later? Is that part of the mystery? And it wasn't.
Right.
But for some reason, they just chose to address the tattoo. I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree with Matt on this 100%.
Yeah, and about the tattoo thing is that maybe they made an effort to tell what the tattoos mean. And the actual meaning of the tattoos, it's like Chinese symbols and everything. They have a character read it. And it's kind of this kind of an interesting statement about where the character is in the series at this point. And it's just kind of like this ironic kind of thing. But I feel like maybe the writers were like, okay, well, we'll make an effort to do this. They did that because the fans were all like clamoring to know about these tattoos. Then as soon as they released that episode, the fans were like, oh, that was a horrible episode. I thought it was going to be something about the smoke monster or something like that kind of backlash. And maybe I can't speak for the writers because I haven't time traveled to write for the show yet, but it could have very well been like okay, we're going to go into season 3. We're going to start answering some questions because they've been clamoring for it. They felt the backlash of that, and they were like, you know what? Screw you guys. We're just going to do our thing. Mm-hmm. I could easily see that being the case because you can't satisfy everyone, and when everyone is focusing on the wrong thing about a series, then it's just going to end poorly. So they ended it on their terms, and I really appreciate them for that because it ended up being one of the best series finales I've ever seen.
That episode is a good microcosm for the show because it illustrates how you can orientate yourself as a fan, because sometimes people want questions answered, and it's just kind of, I think in my opinion, become a rule of television and actually any kind of long form storytelling. Sometimes mystery is just a good thing. Sometimes you don't. Yeah. It's not good to get all the answers. Great example, an episode I could have brought up for this episode about worst episodes is the series finale of Battlestar Galactica. They answer everything, any kind of mystery or question. They answer it in that finale, and it's really, really unsatisfying. It's not a very good finale. That show is spectacular. The meat of that show is really good. But that finale was so unsatisfying because it's like, oh, really? That's what happens? Jeez. It's sometimes a little bit of mystery is a good thing, and you can just you can decide, you can develop it in your own mind the way that you like it, and I think that's why this episode of Lost is a good microcosm for that show, because sometimes when you get the answers, it's so much less satisfying than if you could just develop the characters your own way, sort of. Yeah. Develop the story your own way.
Yeah. And what Lost did was they left us with something to chew on, like something to think about after the show ends. I thought about the finale for months after it, and thought about just where the characters ended up, what happened to them, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, and then they even still released in the final season DVD, they released a bonus feature that was just literally a character going to a warehouse and showing a DVD to characters, or it was a tape or whatever, to other characters. That was basically someone going through and answering some of the questions. And it was like, it's so unnecessary. It's so unnecessary. So yeah.
Do you think they wrote some of the mysteries expecting to answer them though?
Yeah, I'm sure that they did. I'm sure that they expected.
That's the problem I have. That's why it rubs me the wrong way.
How do you mean?
Because they had to have written Walt being supernatural with intentions to tell us why. And
Maybe.
the fact that they didn't bugs me. That's bothersome.
But you also have to take into account that this is a television series, and that in the nature of television itself, they can pose those questions and they can have their own private answers for why, but they don't know that they'll have time to answer it because they don't know their episode order. They don't know how many episodes they'll have next season, how much time they'll have, how many characters are there. A perfect example of that is in season 2, they introduced the character of Mr. Echo, who the actor hated being in Hawaii or something. So they had set up throughout season 2 all of these little things with him. They had he was supposed to be a good counterpoint to the John Locke character, and he was supposed to survive until late in the series. But then he hated being in Hawaii, so they had to kind of write him off as quickly as they could. And because of that, it suffered for it. And it's not a fault of the writers at all because their hands were tied. And the same with Walt is that actor was growing up.
But that's all fine and good. But I feel like you're like making a lot of excuses.
Oh, I'm a diehard Lost apologist.
What's that?
I'm a diehard Lost apologist.
Oh, I know.
So, yeah.
That's kind of what I'm saying. I feel like I'm just trying to understand why the angry nerds, like where they're coming from. That's all I'm trying to do.
It's because they weren't paying attention to the character development. It's some of the best character development I've ever seen in a TV series, and they wrote it off because they were concentrating on the mystery aspect of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. So,
okay.
Having said,
continued when I finish it.
Yes. Having said that,
I have a bad feeling that I won't waver.
You know,
unfortunately.
Yeah. But you might not. We'll see. It's just important that you watch it.
Yeah.
Having said that, we should go to Potpourri.
I guess we're gonna call that to be continued, right?
Yeah.
So let's just do a harsh segue into Potpourri, where we can talk about anything we want, anything we've seen, anything we're about to see, whatever we're looking forward to, as long as it smells good. So, Tiny, what do you want to talk about?
I wanted to talk about a movie that I think was somewhat underappreciated for 2013, a movie called The Fifth Estate, which I finally watched. I was incredibly excited for it. Half that excitement was because it's Benedict Cumberbatch, and he's beautiful.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, he's just awesome. I'm just fallen in love with everything he does. He's fantastic. So I'll admit my bias there, but I was excited because it's that the movie is about WikiLeaks and how it sort of came to be, which is an underreported story as well. In my opinion, it's undervalued because the film helped put in context how revolutionary this information age is, and how to this day it's still changing everything, how powerful the internet is as an information tool. And the movie is interesting. It's actually based on a book that was written by sort of the guy who was kind of like the right-hand man of Julian Assange, who's the guy who founded WikiLeaks. This guy kind of helped found the website. He's not technically a co-founder, but he was hugely instrumental. He's depicted by the German actor Daniel Bruhl, who was first made famous to American audiences in the film Inglourious Bastards. So he's also an incredible actor. I loved his work in this film as well. I think it's an underappreciated film. First of all, obviously this is a film podcast, so let's focus on that. It had a really good script. I was really surprised at how tight they kept the story, because it's still very mysterious, because it's the whole WikiLeaks concept is based on anonymity. So I'm surprised that they have so much detail about it. It is very one-sided. It kind of paints Julian Assange as kind of like an unfunny, deep version of Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory. He's a very distant person. He doesn't really consider other people's feelings. He's just focused on this one thing. He is an idealist to the extreme, and it paints him in that picture. But the story is entirely from the perspective of Daniel Bruhl's character. So it's just his side of the story. So that's a downfall of it, in my opinion. But it's just an amazing story. It's something I wish I would have paid much more attention to the real story as it was developing, where, this Bradley Manning, now known as Chelsea Manning, just essentially stole hundreds of thousands of documents that were in various stages of classification by the federal government and just released them to this website. And there's so many moral conundrums and questions of what's considered moral and what's considered a righteous act in the context of releasing information and how it affects people. It's a really great story in that context. I was really impressed by how they kept it such a tight story. And the performances are really good. I thought Benedict Cumberbatch was great. Again, biased, but I liked it a lot.
Nice.
I highly recommend checking it out, especially if you're sort of unfamiliar with the story of how WikiLeaks came to be and why it's so revolutionary and why it's so important. So I highly recommend it for that reason. I think it was really, really ignored for the most part. I think people should see it. So
Nice.
Cool.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
Do you want me
Matt,
to go
what
next?
about you?
Okay. Well, actually, I just this past weekend, I increased my number of Best Picture nominee watches to 4. After a previous 2. So I watched 2 Best Picture nominees. Briefly, I just want to say that 12 Years a Slave is one of the most just emotionally heart-wrenching theater experiences I've ever had, even with the old couple in the front row yelling into each other's ears, asking if they still want to stay there or if they should go, and being really passive-aggressive about wanting to leave. But, I mean, it was just... It was remarkable. I'm working on a review of it for the site, but I've never been more. I don't know if I've ever been that moved by a movie and more just ashamed at humanity, I would say. Yeah, and also Benedict Cumberbatch was fantastic in that as well.
Yeah.
But the one that I just saw yesterday or a couple days ago was Nebraska.
Cool.
Yeah, which was interesting because I hadn't heard a single thing about it. I was under the impression that it was only playing at our Keystone Art Theater on the north side here, but it was actually at a West Side theater, so I went and saw it there too, or went and saw it there because it's closer. And I from the opening scenes, because I had no idea going in what it was about. I think I knew something about it being about a man who wants to claim $1 million prize or something. That's all I knew. What it's actually about is it's filmed in black and white. Will Forte plays this man who takes his elderly, kind of almost senile father to Nebraska because he got one of those things in the mail saying that he got $1 million, but it's a clear scam. But it's I don't know how much I want to say about it because it honestly resonated with me on a kind of a personal level. Because some of the character interactions and interactions of the family in that were really kind of, some of it hit a little close to home for me. But it was a really remarkable performance by Bruce Dern, who played the father. Kind of a subtle, subdued performance. And June Squibb, I believe her name is. She played his wife, and their dynamic in that movie is the strongest thing. Strongest thing in the movie, because the movie they're going to Nebraska, but they take a detour, and the bulk of the movie takes place in the father's hometown, where they're coming back because they get detoured and they have to stay there for a few days. And it's about it's about Will Forte kind of learning about his father and his mother through this town, this kind of dying small town. And I've said before that I'm a huge fan of small town depictions in movies because I love the way that kind of small town, tight-knit community is romanticized on film. None of that is like that in this movie. This is a very bleak depiction of the small town and a very realistic depiction of a small dying town. And it just hit me in such a strong way. And there's a scene that the whole throughout most of the movie, this isn't a spoiler or anything, but the mother comes to the town too, and she's just horrible to Bruce Dern's character. Cause she's very short with him. She's very impatient. She kind of seems to lack compassion for him. And it's kind of a real portrayal. It's a very kind of real thing. But there's a scene where they're kind of at a graveyard visiting just graves of his family. And she's pointing out to the graves and she's saying the most despicable things about these people. And it's incredibly hard to watch. And what makes it even worse is that you can see your eye is drawn to Bruce Dern and he kind of just has his head lowered and he's not really, he's just trying to respect his family while his wife is just saying like these despicable and deplorable things about people that he loved. And it's just, it's a very powerful scene. And his performance is really, really incredible.
Wow.
So yeah, I highly recommend it. In terms of Best Picture, I liked it a lot. I don't know if I'm not entirely sure I would have picked it as for a Best Picture nomination over like Out of the Furnace, which I think I enjoyed a little bit more. But I still think it's a very powerful movie in itself. And also Stacy Keach plays an old business partner of Bruce Dern. And he has some really good scenes, and he plays just this real like kind of bastard guy. So it's a really good movie, and I highly recommend checking it out.
Cool.
If you can.
Cool.
Yeah. So Mike, how about you? What do you got for us?
I guess I'll share a little story of my Thursday night movie night last week. We're kind of like scraping at the bottom of the barrel. That's the second time I've used that euphemism, that figure of speech today. Yeah. Anyway, so we're trying to figure out what movies to see because there's not a whole lot out that we haven't seen and care to see. So there was a disagreement because I don't really care to see Lone Survivor and my buddy kind of wants to see it. And so we kind of just agreed on Paranormal Activity 4.5.
Okay, the marked ones.
The marked ones, that's right. And so we were going to see that, and I had mild excitement for it. So I checked Fandango.
Oh yeah.
So I'm not expecting to get any Fandango gift certificates here after this. Apparently, Fandango is not always accurate with Showplace Cinema here in Evansville. They have a working relationship with AMC theaters, so those theaters movie times are always accurate, but the ones at Showplace are not accurate. So I was expecting that we were going to go see Paranormal Activity, the marked ones, at 8:00. So we showed up at 8:00 or at 7:50 or whatever, and said one for Paranormal Activity. She goes, the one at 9:35. And we're like, say what? And so we didn't know what to do. So, and then she was not very helpful at all. And I was like, call me crazy. And I like looked on my phone. She was like, oh yeah, sometimes the app is not accurate. She didn't apologize. She was just like, yep, you're an idiot. You should have looked at our website.
Whoa.
And so we're looking up at the board to try to find a movie, and we're like, I don't know, Ride Along? And she's like, oh, you don't want to see Ride Along? A bunch of kids just walked in there. We're like, okay, listen, lady. And so we ended up going with Devil's Due.
Okay.
Which is the movie about the woman who is impregnated by the son of Satan. And Satan's going to return. If it sounds familiar, that's because it is a total ripoff of Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
But of course, it's modern. And I got to say, I didn't hate it.
Okay.
I'm looking around the internet, and it's getting horrible reviews. It's just getting trashed everywhere. So I'm trying to figure out what about it did it for me. There's a scene early on that I think is particularly effective. They honeymoon in the Dominican, and that's also where she is impregnated. Do you guys mind if I spoil it? Do you have any plans to see it?
Go right ahead.
No. Go ahead. Yeah.
So they get lost on the way back to their hotel room, and so this cabbie comes by and asks if they need a ride, and so they get in the taxi, and he says, let me take you to a really cool place, which is super sketchy. You know what I mean? And so they go, and they're kind of like winding through these creepy corridors, and you're like, oh, geez, this is stupid. Why wouldn't they just turn around? This is ridiculous. And then, of course, they go down to this club, and it's like an awesome club, awesome drinks, all kinds of people there. And I love that they created that tension, broke it, and then immediately it turns out that the taxi driver was actually nefarious, and the club is sinister, and so they take the woman down and impregnate her, essentially.
Okay.
And so it's found footage, which as a genre is so ridiculously tired.
Yeah.
So I didn't like that aspect of it, but there were some decent scares, and there were some effective moments. I probably will never see it again, but it wasn't the worst hour and a half I've ever spent in a theater.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's cool.
So there's that.
Yeah. The male lead in that is from Friday Night Lights, so that's the only thing that made me interested in it. But
yeah,
I'm not that eager to see it.
No.
I would have much rather watched Paranormal Activity: The Marked Ones, which is a movie that, as a franchise, I'm a big Paranormal Activity fan. But I mean, I'm so desensitized to it, or so distanced from it that I haven't even bothered to see The Marked Ones. I'm going to wait until Shocktober and watch it then. As it
You
should
saw
be
the
done.
fourth one, right?
Oh, yes, I did.
Okay.
Ugh.
Because you remember I sent you that long rant. text.
Yes. We had a very long conversation about that. It was, it was not good. It was a great Xbox Connect commercial, though.
Yeah. That's about it.
So I think that's all we got for this week, isn't it? Anything else we want to talk about?
I think that does it.
Awesome.
I'm all set.
Right. All right. Well,
Stay tuned. Come back next week for our episode on
I have no idea what we're talking about next week. We'll need to talk about that when we're done here, because
That's always our answer.
we have some ideas.
We're
ideas.
never more than, we're never an episode ahead.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we are.
we
meant
were
to
in
make
the
a
fall.
schedule.
We had the fall
Yeah.
pretty well planned out.
I really meant to make a thing, but we are gonna have we're gonna have a couple podcasters on in the near future. We're gonna have Craig from Intermission Podcast, and I think
Yes.
Tank from Title Pending Movie Podcast with Tank and Fogs is gonna come on.
Awesome.
So,
Tank and Tiny.
good. Exactly. So it'll be fun. But as for now, thanks for listening, guys. Of course, you can find us on Twitter at our respective handles, at Obsessive Viewer for me, at Obsessive Tiny for Tiny, and at I am Mike White for Mike. You can also find us on email at ovpodcast@gmail.com. If you have any clips or anything you want to, like any audio things or whatever, you can send it to us that way, because we still don't know how to set up a voicemail. Like us on Facebook, Tumblr, all that good stuff. And then also vote for us for Podcast of the Month on .com. Also, thank you to Star Tissue for donating our theme song. We really appreciate it, guys. That about does it. Is there anything else? Am I missing anything?
I don't think so.
I think we're good.
Awesome. All right.
good.
Well, see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys. Kisses.
Awesome.
All right, mine is from the series The Office, one of my favorite sitcoms ever. The episode is called the Mother.
I don't remember that episode.
Weird title.
The Mother.
The Mother episode. It's no, season 7. Okay. All right, let me start over.